Good afternoon. This is Kayla Ellis with Nursing 510, and today I am discussing Albert Bandura and his 1977 social learning theory. Albert Bandura was born on December 4th, 1925 in Mundar, Canada. In 1949, he obtained his BA from the University of British Columbia with the Balakian Award in Psychology. In 1951, he obtained his MA in clinical psychology from the University of Iowa. Bandura's choice of psychology as a career came about as chance. Because he worked in the woodwork plant during the afternoons to make ends meet, he was forced to take a heavy course load during the morning. He commuted each morning to the university in a carpool of engineering and pre-med students who started each day very early. His own classes did not start that early. He looked for a filler class, and he came upon his first psychology class and found his career. In 1952, he obtained his PhD from the University of Iowa and married his wife, Virginia. She was a nurse. He completed his postdoctoral internship at the Wichita Guidance Center, directed by a psychologist, and in 1953, Bandura joined the faculty at Stanford University. Finally, in 1964, Bandura became a full-time professor at Stanford and was elected Fellow of American Psychological Association, or the APA. In 1974, he was elected President of American Psychological Association. In 1981, he was elected the president of the Western Psychological Association. Albert Bandura has 16 honorary degrees, including one from Penn State. In 1999, he received the Thorndike Award for Distinguished Contributions of Psychology to Education from the American Psychological Association. In 2002, Bandura was noted by the APA to be the fourth-ranked most frequently cited psychologist of all time and the greatest living psychologist. Currently in 2015, Albert Bandura remains the David Starr Jordan Professor Emeritus of Social Sciences and Psychology at Stanford and continues research in psychology daily. He's still considered one of the most recognized theorists to have borrowed theories used by nursing. Albert Bandura was initially influenced by Robert Sears's work on familial backgrounds of social behavior and identificatory learning, or observing others, in the 1960s. He was also influenced greatly by Miller and Dollard's study of modeling and imitation from the 1941 book Social Learning and Imitation. Additionally, Lev Vygotsky's studies of social interaction and the development of cognition were influential. Also, the experimental demonstration of the social learning theory was based on explanations of key aspects of personality and social development discussed by Freud, such as dependency, aggression, identification, conscious formation, and defense mechanisms. Among the key collaborators with Whewell at the Yale Institute of Human Relations, were John Dollard, Neil Miller, and Robert Sears, who sought to reconcile Freudian and Whewellian viewpoints. Bandura argued Skinner's and Rutter's learning theory, stating that learning is learned through observation. Skinner's explanation of the gaining of new responses relied on the process of sequential approximation, which required multiple trials, reinforcement for components of behavior, and gradual change. Rutter's theory proposed that the likelihood of a behavior occurring was a function of the subjective expectancy and value of the reinforcement. According to Bandura, accounts for a response were not yet learned or observed. Bandura's also had an influential experiment explained as the Boo Boo Doll Experiment study from 1961 to 1963, which he conducted with Dory and Sheila Ross. They observed aggression and non-aggression in children. They also determined behavior in children after watching an adult model act aggressively towards a Boo Boo doll. They found that the children exposed to the aggressive model were more likely to act in a physically aggressive way. This image is an example of Vandora's Boo Boo Doll Experience, Part 1 and Part 2, in which Part 1 is where children watch aggression towards the Boo Boo doll. Consequently, the children act aggressively towards the doll. Part 2 is where the children observe adults being nice to the Boo Boo doll. Therefore, the children act nicely towards the doll. These are actual images from the 1961 to 1963 experiment. Albert Bandura stated, "Learning would be exceedingly laborious, not to mention hazardous, if people had to rely solely on the effects of their own actions to inform them what to do. Fortunately, most human behavior is learned observationally through modeling. From observing others, one forms an idea of how new behaviors are performed, and on later occasions, this coded information serves as a guide for action." This was in his 1977 Social Learning Theory publication. The Social Learning Theory. Albert Bandura's 1977 concept of social influences on learning. He stated, "Learning occurs from observing others, watching, and listening. Social learning is determined by a three-way relationship between cognitive factors, environmental influences, and behavior. This is where people imitate and model actions observed." Bandura notes that it is a cognitive process that takes place in a social context. Additionally, learning specifically occurs through the observation of rewards and punishments, or vicarious reinforcement. And it is noted to be applied widely to the understanding of aggression. Social learning theory key concepts. There are 11 key concepts of the social learning theory. Environment, which are factors physically external to the person and their surroundings. Situation, which is alert awareness of the environment. Behavioral capability, which is the knowledge and skill to perform a given behavior. Expectations, which is an anticipatory outcome of a specific behavior. Expectancies, which are the values that the people place on a given outcome or considered incentive. Self-control, which is the personal regulation of a goal-directed behavior or performance. Observational learning is considered behavioral achievement that occurs by watching the actions and outcomes of another. Reinforcement is a response to a person's behavior that increase or decrease the likelihood of reoccurrence, considered to promote self-initiated rewards and incentives. Self-efficacy is the person's confidence in performing a particular behavior. Emotional coping responses are strategies or tactics that are used by a person to deal with emotional stimuli. And lastly, reciprocal determinism is the dynamic interaction of the person, the behavior, the environment in which the behavior is performed, and considered multiple avenues to behavioral change. Bandura stated in 1977 additionally, "Learning is not purely behavioral, rather it is a cognitive progress that takes place in a social context." Noted here are key elements of the theory. Observational learning. Social learning theory, modeling. Bandura states identification occurs with a model and involves taking on observed behaviors, values, beliefs, and attitudes of that person. There are 3 modeling stimuli. Live, which is an actual person and demonstrating the desired behavior, which can be a mother or a father. Verbal, which is an individual describing the desired behavior in detail and instructing the individual on how to participate in the behavior. Example is a nurse educator. Symbolic, which is where modeling occurs by means of the media. This includes video games and television. Requirements for modeling include attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. Attention is where the observers must attend to the modeled behavior. Attention is impacted by characteristics of the observer and characteristics of the behavior or the event. Retention is in order to reproduce an observed behavior, observers must be able to remember features of the behavior. This process is influenced by observer characteristics and event characteristics. Reproduction is to reproduce a behavior. The observer must organize responses in accordance with the model. The observer characteristics affecting reproduction include physical and cognitive capabilities and previous performances, including reciprocal determinism and behavioral change. Motivation is the decision to reproduce or refrain from reproducing. An observed behavior is dependent on the motivations and expectations of the observer, including the anticipated consequences and internal standards. Analysis and evaluation. Internal criticism includes adequacy, clarity, consistency, logical development, and level of theory development. Adequacy determines how completely the theory addresses the topics it claims to address. It addresses if the theory accounts for the subject matter under consideration. The social learning theory is an adequate middle-range theory that thoroughly addresses all topics without noted holes or gaps. The definition is clearly defined and able to tell an individual the main implications as it relates to social learning. Its scope is wide, which means that it covers many perceptions of behavior. No further modification is needed. Clearly explains how people acquire and maintain certain behaviors, patterns, which will also provide the basis for intervention strategies. Clarity addresses if the theory clearly states the main components to be considered and determines if the reader easily understands it. The social learning theory demonstrates clarity because the relationships between the concepts are clearly specified within the theory. The concepts clearly explain how behavior is learned through interactions and encounters. Additionally, attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation are all closely correlated. Consistency addresses whether the theory maintains the definitions of the key concepts throughout the explanation of the theory, while determining if and how congruency of the terms, interactions, principles, and methods are throughout. The social learning theory remains fairly consistent across all types of behavioral changes. All key concepts are clearly defined and modeling concepts are defined and noted in order. Terms, principles, and methods are corresponding throughout the theory. Additionally, it is noted that the social learning theory is one of the most widely accepted and useful theories in psychology. Logical development resolves the question, does the theory logically follow a line of thought of previous work that has been shown to be true, or does it launch out into unproven territory with its assumptions and premises? The social learning theory is influenced by Robert Sears's work on familial backgrounds and the 1960s Miller and Dollard studies of modeling and imitation. Conclusions made based on Bandora's research are presented logically, and individual identifies a behavior, observes the behavior, and decides whether or not to repeat and model the behavior. Nurses have applied social learning principles successfully when working with teenage mothers and in addressing alcoholism among older adults. Level of theory development. Is it consistent with the conceptualization of middle-range theories? The social learning theory is consistent with key concepts of middle-range theories. The social learning theory started with an empirical phenomenon of observational learning and was later verified by data. The middle-range theories are more practical and applicable in day-to-day practices. External criticism includes complexity, discrimination, reality convergence, pragmatic, scope, significance, and utility. Complexity reviews how many concepts are involved as key components in the theory. The social learning theory is quite a complex theory, as noted by Bandura in his literature. However, the basics of the theory are easily understood without an extensive description. There are over 10 key concepts that are importantly related. Additionally, there are a lot of variables related to modeling, including modeling stimuli and requirements. Given the complexity of the theory, it has been stated in the literature that it is difficult to measure and assess. Discrimination addresses whether the hypothesis generated by the theory led to research results that could not be arrived at using some other nursing theory. It describes if it has precise and clear boundaries and definitive parameters of the subject matter. The social learning theory is noted to have clear boundaries and parameters and is one of the many cognitive or learning theories. Evaluating behavioral change depends on the factors, the environment, the people, and the behavior. I think that the social learning theory is responsible for certain interventions and educational programs in nursing practice. There are no other theories that could allow for the specific framework required for these specific patients. The concepts of the theory, along with modeling, allow for this theory to be specific to itself. Reality convergence determines if the theory's underlying assumptions ring true. It decides whether the theory's assumptions represent the real world and if it represents the real world of nursing. The social learning theory is relevant to healthcare and communication. First, the theory deals with cognitive, emotional aspects and aspects of behavior for understanding behavioral change. Second, the concepts of the theory deliver ways for new behavioral research in health education. Finally, ideas for other theoretical areas such as psychology are welcome to provide new insights and understanding. The social learning theory approach has its origins in traditional theories of classical and operant conditioning, the behaviorist perspective. Behaviorists try to explain the causes of behavior by studying only those behaviors that can be directly observed and measured. Pragmatic determines if the theory can be operationalized in real-life settings. The social learning theory is relevant for designing health education and health behavioral programs. This theory explains how people obtain and maintain certain behavioral patterns, often observed. The theory can also be used by providing the basis for intervention strategies for these people. Additionally, social learning theory has also been used to explain the so-called cycle of violence, or more technically recognized as the intergenerational transmission of aggression. The basic idea is that if you have been the victim of physical abuse as a child, you are more likely to be an abusing parent than if you haven't. It also increases the chances that you will be a wife or husband of a batterer. Unfortunately, a major difficulty is that this theory is complex and not easily measured or assessed. Scope determines how broad or narrow the range of phenomenon that the theory covers is. Despite being a middle range theory that is applicable to practice, the social learning theory has a wider scope in which it has somewhat all-encompassing range of phenomenon covered. Multiple populations, issues, and behaviors can be researched. However, the theory focuses mainly on aggression and deviant behavior of children. Significance is the result of the research that is conducted because of the hypotheses generated by the theory have an impact on the way nurses carry out nursing interventions in the real world, or does it merely describe what nurses do? The significance of the social learning theory in nursing as a result of research is significant to the impact of nurses carrying out interventions to help their patients, specifically certain patient populations. Specific issues in nursing include substance abuse patients, alcoholics, and domestic violence and child abuse patients. Conscious assessment of these types of patients should be made, hypotheses generated, and interventions put into place. Lastly, utility determines if nurses can use the theory to generate hypotheses and are they researchable. Nurses can utilize the theory to generate hypotheses and risk reduction of the destructive behavior of adolescents and also cyclic behavior of domestic violence victims. Hypotheses can be made and researched about these high-risk populations and determine whether the behavior is learned through observation and modeling. Interventions can be populated related to these results. Tools and instruments. Based on the review of literature, it is obvious that self-descriptive questionnaires are widely used in research based on concepts of the social learning theory, along with surveys, videotaping, direct observation, and interviews. The review of the literature. During my literature review, it is key that Bandura's social learning theory is an essential borrowed theory used by nursing. There are multiple nursing articles published that cite the use of Bandura's theory. Although I have only included 3 articles obtained in my literature review, there are many more that I have referenced throughout. Article number 1. It is a 2015 publication from the Journal of Health Communication. The title is An Applied Test of the Social Learning Theory of Deviance to College Alcohol Use. It is a randomized cross-sectional study that examines the effects of social learning on deviant behavior and alcohol use in college students. Several hypotheses about influences on college drinking derived from the social learning theory were tested and confirmed in this study. Researchers, college administrators, law enforcement officers, and health officials, along with local representatives, have recommended the use of increased enforcement of alcohol-related laws. With the use of a questionnaire, it was determined that this study suggests that the social learning theory shows qualified promise as a conceptual framework for enforcement campaigns aimed at decreasing drinking on and around campus of the college. 3 sets of hypotheses were derived and generally supported, but with differing levels in different contexts. Article number 2 is also a 2015 publication within the International Journal of Adolescent Medicine and Health. It is titled, How Adolescents Learn About Risk Perception and Behavior in Regards to Alcohol Use in Light of Social Learning Theory, a Qualitative Study in Bogota, Colombia. It is a qualitative study, part of a larger study exploring the social representatives of risk and alcohol use in adolescents and their communities, while using key concepts from Bandura's social learning theory. The problem in Colombia includes the use of alcohol and one of the main risky behaviors carried out by adolescents, given that alcohol is the principal drug of abuse in this group. Understanding how adolescents learn about risk and behavior is important in developing effective prevention programs. The theory of social learning underlines the importance of social interaction in the learning process. It suggests that learning can occur in three ways: a live model in which a person is enacting the desired behavior, a verbal interaction in which the desired behavior is described, and a symbolic learning in which modeling occurs by an influence of the media. Data was obtained by observation or semi-structured interviews. It was determined that adolescents can identify several risks related to the use of alcohol, which for the most part appear to have learned through verbal instruction. However, this risk recognition does not appear to correlate with their behavior. Parental modeling, along with messages conveyed by the media, represent two other significant sources of learning that are constantly contradicting the message relayed through verbal instruction and correlate to a greater extent with adolescent behavior. Article number 3 is a 2003 publication in the Journal of Advanced Nursing. It is titled The Self-Efficacy Training for Patients with End-Stage Renal Disease. It is a randomized controlled study. The purpose was to examine the effectiveness of self-efficacy training and social learning on fluid intake compliance. This is in the specific patient population with end-stage renal disease. The intervention was based on Bandora's theory and included an educational component, performance mastery, experience sharing, and stress management. The outcome measure was the mean body weight gain between two dialysis sessions. Data were collected at baseline, 1, 3, and 6 months following the intervention and analyzed by descriptive and repeated measures. The study supports the effectiveness of Bandora's social learning and self-efficacy training in controlling mean body weight gains of end-stage renal patients receiving hemodialysis. Application of the theory to research and practice. Again, many recent nursing articles reference Bandora's social learning theory. It is considered highly applicable to nursing practice. Bandora's social learning theory is noted for successful implementation of interventions and educational programs. For an example, the study of Developmentally Supportive Care Training Program by Liu in 2003 supports care for preterm infants based on Bandora's using observational learning and modeling. Additionally, the 2004 study by Doherty, Piper, and Frost is based on Bandora's theory. It's designed to improve functioning in those patients with recent ICD emplacement. The article describes that the social learning theory, in particular self-efficacy, is an individual's conviction in one's ability to execute a particular behavior that is required to produce a particular outcome. Behavioral change and maintenance are functions of both expectations about the outcomes that will result from engaging in a behavior and expectations about one's ability to execute the behavior required. Self-efficacy relates to the beliefs about capabilities of performing specific behaviors in particular situations, not to a general personality trait overall. Thus, self-efficacy expectations will vary greatly depending on the particular task and context. Self-efficacy affects emotional reactions such as anxiety, distress, and thought processes, especially to those patients who are new to ICD implants. Another research article, Say, 2003, describes the social learning theory-based intervention to promote adherence to specific diet for end-stage renal patients. The social learning theory, as described throughout this video, is significantly related to adolescents' health promotion programs, and it is one of the main theories used in design for education programs for patients of abuse. The literature supports the social learning theory is a ready theory to support studies, leading to achievement of knowledge for evidence-based practice in nursing. education, interventions, and programs based on the borrowed theory used by nursing has been influential for over 38 years to practice. In my opinion, there is no need for alteration at this time. Thank you and have a good day.